Hello, beautiful ladies of the Goddess Ascension group. I've done lots of different things with the blinds, but I seem to have this dappled light vibe. So I'm just going to go with it. Good morning. Welcome to my live transmission today. It's been a minute since I've been on here and done a live. I've moved house, so this is my first live transmission from my new home, which feels really beautiful. I've been waiting a long time to have my own space, to be able to talk to you all in a space that feels like a space that I can really melt into. And if you are here, when you come on, if you just say hi to me or drop a heart in the comments, I would really appreciate that so that I know you're here and I can welcome you. And if you're catching this on the replay, then when you watch it later, you can just do #PonderReplay. And then I will know that you have seen it as well, which lights my heart. So I have been waiting to come on. Hi, Lindsay. How are you doing? Hi, Lindsay. Lovely to see you. How are you? I have been waiting for, let's say, a wave to come over me of inspiration to come and talk to you about something meaningful. And these waves, they tend to have a mind of their own, you know. This is the interesting thing about coaching, is that sometimes there's a frustration because you feel like, why aren't these waves coming regularly every Sunday? So that I could come here and do this every week and show that level of commitment, which is something that I really want to move towards. However, the body, the wisdom, the intuition has its own rhythm. And the universe drops us material as and when we are ready to assimilate it and to share it. Oh, that's nice to hear, Lindsay. Thank you. So what we're going to be talking about this morning, Lindsay, and for anybody else who is going to join us a bit later, what I want to share with you this morning is a topic which is really, really close to my own heart. And the topic is conscious communication. Hi Jess. Conscious communication is something that we have never been taught how to do. Some of you might not even know what I mean when I talk about conscious communication. So I'm going to break it down for you this morning, and I'm going to give you a real life example of something that happened very recently with a very good friend of mine, where we both managed to ride a trigger or an activation which came up for me with a lot of grace and a lot of ease, and with a very rapid transformation, in the sense that we both came back to our center point really quickly. And most of the time in our relationships, when a trigger comes up or an activation comes up, we very rarely get to experience that level of grace and ease around sharing it, expressing it, and releasing it that I experienced with my friend earlier in the week. So it is my pleasure to bring to you this transmission, because I really believe that this is how we change the world. You know, a lot of what we're seeing right now on the world political stage is simply an amplification of our inability to do conscious communication, our inability to navigate triggers, and our inability to escape the victim, rescuer, persecutor triangle. Those are the reasons why despite the level of progression that we've made in technology, space travel, AI, you name it, humans have reached the most phenomenal level of evolution, development, intelligence. And yet our emotional intelligence has predominantly remained at the age of approximately 3. It has not. Even the leaders of the world, if you look at the way they communicate, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. I've warned you. If you don't take my warning, I'm going to launch a missile on you. Like, that's the equivalent of a 3-year-old saying to another 3-year-old, if you don't give me that toy, I'm going to punch you in the face. Right? So we have a duty as a humanity now. We have a huge duty to do the inner work so that we evolve beyond that level of interacting. So that we become a beacon of light, so that we become an example to others around us of how this can be done, and how this can be done with a huge amount of beauty and courage, vulnerability. It's not an easy thing to do, conscious communication. It requires quite a lot of self-mastery. But when we learn the art of it, for me, for you, for us, yeah, absolutely. When we learn the art of it, I can almost describe it as feeling like a jolt into another level of an operating system, a more sophisticated operating system. If you think of it like a computer, the operating systems that we use in computers upgrades itself all the time as the intelligence of the technology upgrades. But when it comes to the way we respond in our relationships, when we get triggered, we are running off automated programs that got installed in us when we were very young children. And we are still reacting and responding from that level of evolution or lack of evolution. So this morning, you may want to grab a notebook because I'm going to give you a really powerful acronym that I came up with last night using the word love. So we're going to anchor in this intelligence. We're going to anchor in this understanding of how to navigate conflicts in our lives in an infinitely more skillful way than we have been doing up till now, using this acronym of L.O.V.E. for love. I promise you, if you learn to anchor in what I'm going to share with you this morning, you will see your dynamics with your partner, your children, your friends, your colleagues. You will see them shift beyond recognition into something way more evolved. So I'm going to start by breaking down what a trigger is before I go into explaining to you a trigger that came up for me earlier this week. For some of you, that term will be very familiar. For others, it might not be. So a trigger is when somebody usually does something or says something which you perceive as a threat, or you perceive as a slight on you, or an insult, or you perceive it as some kind of attack on your personality, or whatever it is. And if we look at the semantics of the wording, trigger, I am triggered, literally creates the image of a loaded gun, right? It's like you have said or done something which has activated my nervous system and I am now triggered, i.e. there is now a gun pointing at your head, metaphorically speaking, that could go off any minute, right? The important thing to understand about triggers is that whatever the trigger is in the here and now, whatever your partner said that really rubbed you up the wrong way, or your sister, or whoever it is, whatever that trigger is here and now, the person who's just activated it is not the person who implanted it. And that is a really, really important thing to understand. So for example, for years, I had a core self-belief that I was stupid, right? So if anybody said anything to me that remotely compounded that belief, let's say I was playing a board game with some friends and I did something that, you know, didn't make sense, or I made a move that was wrong and somebody made a comment about it. That's good to know, Lindsay. You know, because I was already predisposed, so somebody was like, duh, Laura, it's your turn or whatever, they might have just meant that in the most innocent way. They were just joking with me. But because that core belief was already there that I'm stupid, they've trodden on a fucking landmine without realizing it inside my energy body. I'm likely to react to that comment in a way that somebody else who didn't have that underlying core belief that they were stupid wouldn't react to it, right? So the first thing to understand in terms of developing our emotional intelligence in relationships and how we communicate, the very first thing is to understand that when you get triggered by someone, although they've activated you in the moment, they are not the one who originally implanted that belief or that trigger. Does that make sense? Because when you understand that, already your level of blame and counterattack towards the other person will be reduced. When you understand that they didn't create it, they've just activated it, already your tendency to want to act out and attack them will reduce. So I had a situation recently, which I'm going to explain to you now because it's so helpful before I go into the L.O.V.E acronym. It's so helpful to have an actual context that I can then walk you through these tools with, right? So a very, very, very good friend of mine who I adore, who I met online last January, when I first started doing lives and doing masterclasses and things like that. This is a friend who I have still to this day not met in person, but we have developed a really close bond online, and this person has done lots of my coaching programs. In fact, I think she's done all of them. This is a person who, when she is in one of my containers or on one of my coaching programs, she brings so much to me, like more than she could probably even understand, because she's so appreciative of my teachings and she's so generous with the way she expresses that appreciation to me, and she's so enthusiastic about the teachings, and she integrates them at the speed of light and then has even more downloads and more insights in relation to things that I've taught, and then comes back to me with more ideas and more juiciness. So she really waters me, you know? It's like, I don't know whether you've ever seen that image. It's like an art picture of two women with a watering can and like flowers on their head, and they're like watering each other's crowns, you know? But this friend really gives me that feeling of being like very watered and nurtured and appreciated. And I appreciate her presence on my programs more than probably even she is aware, because she supports me. She doesn't realize probably how much she's supporting me, but just by being so present, so active, so encouraging of other people, she's often almost at times felt like she's in a kind of assisting role for me, right? So that's the dynamic that we've developed. Now, this friend also happens to be a single mother who is on benefits and has 2 children. So, partly based on things that she said, but a significant part of it is based on my own assumptions. I've assumed, based on that limited information, that this person is struggling financially. Now, that may or may not be true. I think it is true. But nevertheless, first step in my evolution of understanding the dynamics here is for me to own the fact that I've made an assumption about her finances. Because very often we make assumptions about people, and based on those assumptions, we make decisions, we make concessions, we make compromises perhaps, without actually asking the question directly of, are you in a position to afford this program? For example. So I made a proposal to this friend, which I 100% stand by because it felt absolutely right to make it at the time. I said to her, look, I appreciate having you on my programs so much, and I appreciate that your financial situation is somewhat limited. So I would be really, really happy to have you on my programs for the year on a pay-as-you-feel basis because I love having you there and because I feel so supported by your presence. So this felt like an amazing option for both of us, right? Because for her, not being in a position to necessarily pay for like high ticket coaching, which can cost thousands, but having a natural thirst for this knowledge and this information, I became an incredible access point for her to gain that information and to make the leaps and bounds that she desires to make, because she is also forging herself a business as a coach. So for me, it was a case of having somebody there that felt very consistent, that feels very consistent and very supportive. And for her, it was a case of gaining access to a lot of coaching for an extremely affordable price, right? So this was a mutually beneficial and uplifting arrangement. So far, so good. 0 triggers. Fast forward to a few days ago. This friend messaged me. And by the way, before I go any further, I just want to be very clear that I asked my friend if it was okay by her for me to talk about this on a live, because I felt and feel that it is such a helpful and juicy context for us all to learn from. And she 100% said that she was more than happy for me to talk about it. She also may well talk about it in one of her containers. And she fully understands that this is in the greater good to bring this example to light. So it's really important for me, before I share any more of the story, to be really clear that this is a fully consensual and permission-based sharing from her. So, yeah. I don't know, 5-6 days ago, maybe slightly longer, she sent me a little voice note. And in the voice note, she said that she was feeling very drawn to doing a program with either Melanie and Leah, who is the queen of the Alpha Femme world, whose programs range from anything from probably $111 for the cheapest and $20,000 for the most expensive. So just to put it into context, that those are Melanie's prices. The other coach that my friend expressed a desire to potentially work with is a coach that I've just had 3 sessions with, who is an incredible coach by the name of Tasha Wall. And once again, her prices are very much on the high ticket end. It's $1,111 for 3 sessions with Tasha Wall, 3 private sessions with Tasha Wall. This is a very large amount of money for very exceptional coaching. So this friend of mine, who is a single mother on benefits, also was expressing a desire to work with either Melanie or Tasha and asking my advice about which one I thought would suit her better or which program I might recommend from either of them, and to just give any advice that I had. Now, when I received that message, there was quite a strong activation inside of me. And the activation, if I crystallize it down to what is the core wound that got tapped into here, the core wound that got tapped into was, I'm being taken advantage of. This is a piss take. If this person can afford these incredibly expensive coaches, or is even considering paying out for these incredibly expensive coaches, then how is it that this person has also paid me a very, very, very small contribution to my programs, which are already very, very accessible and affordable, right? That was my trigger. And I'm just explaining this in a very clear way because it's important to do that in order to really understand how we moved forward from there. So of the acronym L.O.V.E, L-O-V-E, you might want to write that down. There are 4 things that relate to the L in terms of how to navigate conscious communication. The first one for the L is let it breathe. Let it breathe. Because very often when something happens where somebody says or does something which triggers us, we often respond really quickly, like a knee-jerk response. There is a trigger that then wants to somehow lash out, externalize that energy that's built up inside of our body of like frustration or anger or whatever it is, right? So there can be a tendency to want to like immediately get back to the person and be like, why the hell are you asking my advice about this when you're on my program and you don't even, blah, 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 you know, blah, 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 right? That is not the vibe. That is not the vibe if you are invested in this relationship with this person, which I most 100% am. So the first thing to do is let it breathe. You do not have to respond to people that minute or that hour or even that day. And very often we would do so much better in our relationships if we could master even the first step, which is trigger activation in the body, all kinds of voices in your head activating, telling you this person doesn't respect you, this person's taking the piss, Let it breathe. Let it breathe. While you're letting it breathe, do an inner excavation. Because whenever anybody triggers us, essentially, they are inviting us to look within ourselves and see, where have I gone out of alignment? Where have I compromised myself? Where am I not truly valuing myself? They are just a mirror. So in many ways, to get angry with the other person is really missing the point. Evolution is what the E stands for. So in order to use a trigger or an activation for evolution, the thing is not to really even focus on the other person. The thing is to focus on what has the other person tapped into in me that still needs attention, that still needs healing, that still needs to be looked at or tweaked, right? So when I turned the mirror back onto myself instead of out towards my friend, what I found was I've made assumptions about this person's financial situation rather than asking her directly what feels doable to you. Do you feel you could pay in full? That would have been actually the most intelligent thing to start with, right? To have asked her the question rather than assuming something and then making an offer accordingly. We often make assumptions about people based on limiting beliefs like, oh, because this person's a single mother, because this person's on benefits, automatically that means that they are in some kind of victim state. And I then have to turn into a rescuer and make all kinds of concessions for them that somehow even perpetuates the dynamic of them feeling like a victim, right? And ultimately, if you're in the game of empowering women, which is 100% what I'm about, then keeping somebody locked into some kind of victim status is actually not helpful. She also told me in another voice note that she had sold a piece of furniture that day and made £90, and she was well chuffed. And I am so glad that she shared that with me, because that alone woke me up out of the victim rescuer dynamic that I was subconsciously in with her, right? It shook me out of it, because it was like, wait a minute, this person is a fucking entrepreneur. She's super intelligent. She knows how to use social media, Facebook Marketplace, whatever she used to sell that piece of furniture, and she's made money on it. My last program that I did in January cost £65. She made 90 just like that off a table. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That when we assume people are empowered, they find their power. When we assume that people are disempowered, then that is what is reflected back to us in the way they respond and behave. So everybody in your life is simply mirroring back to you how you are being or behaving or what you are assuming towards them. Everyone is a mirror. That's why when you change how you look at people and the assumptions that you make about them, their behavior towards you will shift like that. And you won't fucking believe it. You'll just be like, how is it even possible that this situation has turned around like that? It's because you have changed the lens through which you are looking at that person. So the first thing that this situation has given me the opportunity to do is to release seeing this friend in some kind of disempowered victim state around money. Because in the single story that she shared with me about selling that table, she blew out of the water any belief that I had been carrying that she wasn't able to access money. We are all able to access money when we choose to. And that can be a very controversial thing to say. A lot of people will argue tooth and nail with that one, and they'll say, Lindsay's saying, I've been saying loads that people's actions are only a reflection of themselves. Shift that, Lindsay. People's actions, people's actions can be a reflection of themselves for sure. But often people's actions towards us are reflections of us and what we are putting out to them and what we are putting out to the world. We are a vibrational match for every single person we attract into our lives. So to always put the lens on them and say, well, it's because of the way they are, you're missing the key point. The key point is, why am I attracting this dynamic? Why am I attracting this person even? That's where you're going to see the change. Because if we only think it's because the other person's off center but we're fine, we're not doing any inner work. We're just seeing ourselves as the good person and the victim. I am just being nice. I am just being lovely. I am just being generous, and this person's taking the piss. Do you see what I mean? You've put yourself in the victim position there. The victim, rescuer, persecutor triangle is like a revolving door. Sometimes we're the victim. Sometimes we're the rescuer. Sometimes we perceive ourselves as the victim, but someone else perceives us as the rescuer. You will see that on the global stage, not only individually. If you are the Ukraine, you probably might see Russia as the persecutor. If you are Russia, you might see the US as the persecutor. If you are the UK or the US, you might see yourself as the rescuer. If you are Russia, you might see the UK or the US as the persecutor. Does that make sense? Wherever you see things through your perspective, you will perceive things differently. So, coming back to how I navigated this situation. I used the first L of letting it breathe. While I let it breathe, I shifted the lens onto myself and looked at where I and how I had played my part in attracting this situation. Number one, I'd made assumptions about my friend's inability to access money, which I have now released because she has shown me with the example about the furniture that that is simply not true. So I've released those limiting beliefs. And by releasing those limiting beliefs towards her, I've actually empowered her. I've empowered her because I'm now seeing her through the eyes of a powerful woman rather than somebody to feel a little bit, not sorry for, but somebody to make concessions for because of X, Y, Z, right? The other thing that I realized is that I didn't trust that she would stay in my world if I asked her to pay in full. So there was something around needing her presence or feeling that I needed her presence and being willing to make a compromise in order to gain it, rather than trusting her and trusting my own work fully enough in relation to her that if she desired to be there, she would find a way to be there, and she would find a way to be there at the same price point as the other people. The third thing that it was really important for me to remember before I even contemplated speaking to her is that she never at any point asked me for a discount. She never at any point asked me for a discount. I offered it. So when we offer things from the heart, it's then not okay to turn around and attack the other person for the way they subsequently behave, right? We have to take ownership of what we've offered. However, obviously, when somebody then comes back to you saying that they're considering investing significantly more money in another coaching program, of course, that's going to create some kind of activation, right? But it's important that I take responsibility that this person didn't ever ask for that concession. So once I had done the inner work to turn the lens onto myself, then it was the appropriate time to bring it to her. So at least 3 days went by before I got back to her. That is 100% the correct way to do things. Because when we get back to someone when we're still activated, it's not going to go well. We're going to blame them. We're going to make them wrong. We're going to make ourselves the victim. We're going to threaten them with, this. We threaten people a lot with insinuating that if they don't behave in the way we want them to behave, we might cut them off. That's the ultimate threat. So we don't want to be using those tactics anymore. We need to transcend that. So I'm going to walk you through now how the communication went with her once I'd done the inner work and I was ready to bring the conversation to her. When I voice noted her back, the first thing that I said to her was, I love you. This is so important. Before we share an activation with somebody we love, is to preface it with an affirmation that we love them, that we care about them, and that we're not going to pull the plug. Because very often when we bring our triggers to people's doorstep, like a loaded gun, we do it with an inference, with a hint that if they don't play their cards right, we might just bin them off completely. We do it in romantic relationships all the time. You know, if you're going to be like this, I just don't know if this relationship feels right to me. If you don't remember to do this for me, then I may not remember to do this for you either. If you don't think that this is important enough, then I don't think it's important enough either. You know, we're always resorting back to very childish tit for tat ways of navigating conflict, especially in romantic relationships. It's much easier, although it's still pretty tricky, to do this work with friends. There's less inherent triggering with friends than there is in romantic relationships or with family members. So if you want to start to practice it, I really recommend practicing it with friends. So the first thing I said in my voice note was, I love you. So the first L is let it breathe. The second L is love, affirming them. As soon as you affirm somebody before you share your activation, their nervous system activation immediately is going to come down to neutral, because they're like, oh, okay, this person's not threatening to cut me off. This person's not, this person is affirming to me that they love me before they share whatever's activated them. That feels safer, much safer for the other person to then receive whatever's coming to follow up from that. The next L is longevity. Let it breathe. Express that you love them. Number 3, longevity. Meaning, I said to my friend, I love you. I love having you in my world. I love our friendship. I get so much from it. I love having you on my coaching programs. And for as long as you want to be there, I hope that you will continue to be there, because you bring me a lot of joy, a lot of life, a lot of, vibes. So the longevity piece is super, super important. Why? Because that shows the other person that whatever the activation is that I'm going to share with you, I see a future beyond the activation. Does it make sense? Again, that helps their nervous system to calm right down, because they're like, well, whatever it is, whatever activation it is that she's got, she still loves me, and she still sees a future with me. So whatever it is, we're going to ride it. So now the other person is way more primed to hear it than they would be if they thought that you were going to ultimately threat to cut them off, and then there is no future. So we have to stop using that as a weapon. If you don't do this, if you behave like this, I'm going to cut you off. Because it creates this profound feeling of mistrust. Nobody feels safe. It's like, again, it comes back to this military analogy of each powerful country having this arsenal of weapons and always having a thinly veiled threat that if they were sufficiently triggered by the other superpower, they would use them. And you can see how dangerous that is when that plays out on the world stage. But if you look within yourself, you will find that you are using very similar techniques metaphorically. The ultimate threat, the ultimate weapon in our relationships is I will cut you off if you cross a line with me. Now, don't get me wrong. In the context of any type of abusive relationship or anything like that, where somebody is really quite toxic in your life, by all means, use that. But with anybody who you desire to have a long-term friendship or relationship with, you don't want to ever use that threat, either directly or indirectly. Put that weapon down. If they feel you put that weapon down, they will put that weapon down. And then you can have a conversation which actually feels safe and expansive and like you're actually moving forwards together and evolving together. Remember, E is for evolution. So we've got let it breathe, we've got love, we've got longevity. The next one is language. The last one for L is language. See if you can feel the difference between saying to somebody, you've triggered me, you've pissed me off, right? If you start like that, their frontal cortex is already kicking off because the reptilian brain is like, I'm being attacked. I either need to run, counterattack, freeze, or fawn. Those are the 4 trauma responses. Fawning is when we get on our knees begging for forgiveness because we're terrified that we're going to be excommunicated. Those are the 4 trauma responses. We do not want to put the other person into a trauma response. That is not the objective here. So choose your language really carefully. Trigger, as I've already said, carries inherently a trigger. It will create a visual in your brain of a loaded gun. So nobody wants to hear the words, you've triggered me. I had a Greek friend once who was very direct, very direct. And bless her, she was always getting into confrontations with people at work because they just thought she was really aggressive, but she was just being Greek, and that's, they do speak in a much more direct way. And she came bursting round to my house once a few years ago. Unexpected. She just turned up after work on the doorstep. I opened the door, having only just got back from work myself. And the first thing she said to me was, I am very triggered. You triggered me. You really triggered me. And I was just like, whoa. I was just like, whoa, that's intense. You've literally burst through my doorstep and the first thing you've said was, you triggered me. Luckily, I'd already done quite a lot of inner work by that point. I was able to hold it, but I didn't like it. Of course, I didn't like it. And that wasn't the most evolved way for her to express it to me. On the other hand, at the very least, she had the courage to come to the house and speak to me about it directly, rather than doing what a lot of people do and moaning and bitching about it to other people, or going cold with the person who's triggered them, but not explaining why, which is passive aggressive. So we usually swing when triggers come up between aggressive behavior and passive aggressive behavior. Neither of those is helpful. Neither of those is going to create the outcome that you desire. Because ultimately, the outcome that we desire is to be seen, to be validated, to not be threatened that if we speak our truth, we're going to be cut off, to not be threatened if we do something that triggers the other person, we're going to be cut off. Or we need to put that weapon down and move into a much more evolved way of communicating. So with this friend that I'm talking about now regarding the coaching and the, discounted prices that I had allowed her to do my programs for, coming back to that conversation, when I spoke to her about it, I'm going to move towards the O now. O is for objective, opportunity, and ownership. So the language point is, instead of saying you triggered me, You made me feel this way. The ownership piece is, I'd really like to share something with you that came up for me. So I love you. I love having you in my life. I love our friendship. And I am really excited to continue to work with you in these programs. Affirming to the person that there is no threat that this friendship is not going to survive. The language. And I'd really like to share with you something which came up for me recently, which created something of an activation inside me. Can you feel the difference between the way I've just phrased that and you triggered me? It's a world apart, isn't it? Something came up for me which created an activation around the request that you made for me to give you some advice about working with either Melanie or Tasha. So the first step is I'm taking ownership of the trigger. It occurred in my body. That friend didn't put it there. She activated it. It's different. I then shared with her why that was tricky for me. Based on the assumptions that I'd made about her finances, I had made the offer for a pay-as-you-feel arrangement, but there was an activation for me when suddenly it seemed that you were asking for advice regarding coaches that are significantly more expensive. So I contextualized what the trigger was. The ownership piece is when I said to her, and I fully acknowledge that you never asked me for a discount. That was my offer. Yeah, that's the ownership piece. The next O is opportunity. If you thank somebody when they've caused an activation within you for the opportunity that they've brought to you to reflect on yourself, that is next level conscious communication. So I thanked my friend for the opportunity that she gave me to reflect on the extent to which I am truly valuing the worth of my own programs and the extent to which that I'm making assumptions about people's financial capabilities, which actually put them in quite a limiting box, right? So by sharing with her that she'd given me an opportunity to reflect and grow, already that is taking our friendship to the next level, because what that is communicating to her is not only can our friendship survive a trigger or an activation, but it can actually thrive because you are giving me opportunities to see more deeply myself and where I've still got room for growth. And you're giving me an opportunity to speak my truth. The other O is for objective. What is my objective in opening this conversation with this friend? Or this lover or partner or grown-up child or whoever it is? What is my objective? Before you even begin to bring a situation to somebody that's caused an activation, ask yourself, what is my objective in sharing it with this person? If your objective is to be right and to make them acknowledge that they are wrong, you are never going to get the outcome that you desire. You are never going to come away from that feeling healed, seen, evolved, powerful. You're not. So you want to approach these conversations where an activation has occurred with an awareness. Have I transcended the need to make them wrong and to make myself right? Can I go beyond that and look at what is the growth opportunity for me here? What can I actually be grateful for that this person has pointed out to me inadvertently by activating this particular thing in me? You don't even need, see, sometimes with my mum in the past, she'd say sorry for a certain thing and then she'd quickly follow it up with, but you should be sorry for this. You know, it doesn't work when we tell the other person how they should feel or what they should take ownership of. It only works when you take ownership of what your learning has been or what you desire moving forwards, and allow them the space to do the same. Not treating people, as my coach Melanie says, like turkeys, but treating them like conscious humans. People will amaze you when you start treating them like conscious, evolving humans instead of turkeys that need you to tell them what they should and shouldn't say about their own behavior or what they should and shouldn't be sorry for. That will simply put the other person on the defensive. Let them be responsible for what they've learned from it. You will never fully know, probably, what the other person has learnt or seen from this experience of this activation that you've brought to them. But behind the scenes, they will be processing it way more than you give them credit for. So giving people more credit for the work that they're doing behind the scenes is another really important part of the piece. The other objective that I had for bringing this activation to my friend is the V for visibility. I desired for her to see me, to see that I am capable of being activated, to know me. When we don't ever allow people to see what's been activated within us, when we just go away and do the work behind the scenes and close the curtain and then open the curtain again when we've got our makeup on and we're all stage ready and we're ready to face them again and pretend that everything's fine, we bypass a really important part in the intimacy piece. Intimacy means into me see. One of my favorite quotes from Tara Brach is, "Let no place within me remain closed. For where I am closed, I am false, and I wish to stay clear in your sight." Let no place in me remain closed. For where I am closed, I am false, and I wish to stay clear in your sight. Can you feel the beauty? Can you feel the beauty in those words? I wish to stay clear in your sight. When we allow people behind the scenes access to our process, we are creating intimacy. When we pretend that there was no trigger and everything's fine and we sweep it under the carpet, we are creating distance, emotional distance. Because even if we don't tell the person that there was an activation, we are animals. We use nice, polite English words to talk to people most of the time. But the vast majority of the way we communicate with others is through our nervous system and through our non-verbal communication. When we're not happy with somebody, our tone of voice changes, our level of eye contact decreases, physical contact usually disappears completely. If it's online, we don't respond, or we respond in a very brief way, or we don't put an emoji at the end with a heart like we normally would. We let people know in millions of ways that we're not happy with them. And they feel it, but they don't know why. They don't know what they've done. They don't know what happened. And all that does is it creates another layer of film over your heart between you and them. And not only between you and them, but between you and the next person and the next person who wishes to connect with you. We've always historically gone in one of two directions when it comes to conscious communication. We've either counterattacked when we felt triggered, or we've gone cold, ice cold, freeze the person out, let them know we're not happy, passive aggressive, aggressive, passive aggressive. E is for evolution. E is for evolution, to move beyond those patterns. How do we move beyond those patterns? We do the inner work. We bring the focus back to ourself. Why did this trigger happen for me? What did this person tap into? What still needs healing? What still needs looking at? What alignment tweaks do I need to make? Timing, choosing the right timing, letting it breathe, coming back to it when you're ready to come back to it from a place of evolution. If you are committed to this friendship with this person or this relationship with this person, then you are committed to growth and evolution over a lifetime. So I want to learn through my interactions with you, both the ones that feel pleasant and the ones that feel less pleasant. I want to evolve with you, and I want you to evolve with me. And I want to bring my truth to you so that you don't just see this polished version of me, so that you actually see the real me, working through my activations in real time, modeling to you how it can be done gracefully. That's how I can be of the greatest service, not by presenting this like polished, finished facade to the world or to my friends or to the people that I love, but letting them see, you know what, sometimes things come up for me that I have to work on. And this is how I've worked on this one. And the incredible thing is that my friend came back to me with such a beautiful response. V is for vulnerability. V is for visibility and vulnerability. Believe it or not, there is a huge level of vulnerability in sharing an activation with somebody. Because essentially, when we share an activation with somebody, we're sharing the fact that they have tapped into or trodden on a vulnerable space. In my case, in this situation, my vulnerable space was perhaps the feeling that I'm not fully honored, not fully respected, not fully valued financially. But that person is simply mirroring back to me that I'm not fully honoring myself financially yet. So I can be deeply appreciative to this person for inadvertently mirroring that back to me, right? So it's quite vulnerable to say this caused an activation, because there is a chance, there is a possibility that the other person is going to react defensively, or they're going to counterattack because they're going to feel like you've attacked. And that's the risk we take. That's the risk we take when we choose this path of visibility and vulnerability and heart-centered communication. But the way you approach the other person with this activation, to a very large extent, will determine how they respond to you. There are no guarantees. But the more the other person feels that there is no attack here, the more the other person feels safe that you are not going to abandon them at all because this has happened, that you want to move through it. The more the other person sees you taking responsibility for some of the ways that you've been a bit off center, the more they feel your gratitude to them for shining a light. Can you see that they're already primed to respond to you in a completely different way than if you turn up on their doorstep like my Greek friend did and say, I am very triggered, you trigger me. Yeah? So this friend came back to me with so much grace in her heart. I was worried that she might be so mortified because I know that she respects me and loves me hugely. I know that. So I was a bit worried that she might feel so guilty and so mortified to have activated me that she might hide under a rock and never come back. Cut me off to protect herself from having to feel that level of guilt and shame. Right? We do that a lot. We cut people off because they create or activate feelings of guilt and shame when we feel like we've done something wrong. It's a childhood wound that we are still living with. So a part of me was worried that it might be too much for her and she might crumble under that honesty. But a deeper part of me chose to trust her, to trust that she is an evolved and evolving woman who is emotionally mature, who wobbles sometimes like we all do, but ultimately she's on the pathway to self-actualization and she is going to feel the power in this opportunity. O is for opportunity to bring this level of growth to our friendship, right? So she came back to me and said, "Thank you so much for sharing your truth." Do you know how powerful it is, how nourishing it is to your soul to share your truth in a vulnerable way and to be affirmed rather than defended against or attacked? To be thanked for it. This is game changing in our dynamics. Game changing. She then shared with me that after she'd left me the voice note asking my advice about working with one of these high ticket coaches, she had a strange feeling in her body like, maybe I shouldn't have sent that message, maybe I shouldn't have asked that. And I don't know if she was completely sure at the time why she had that icky feeling after she'd asked me, but she did. So at some level she knew, her body knew, that there was something a little bit off in that situation based on our financial, agreement. So she acknowledged the truth, you see. She met my truth with her truth. She acknowledged the truth that for her, it had left her with not a good feeling, and she had a sense that perhaps it wasn't the best thing to ask me that. Following from that, she said something very beautiful. She said, I appreciate you so much. I love you so much. Your programs have been phenomenal for me. Incredible. I desire to continue working with you and doing your programs and being connected with you. And it's my desire to pay you in full for the next program and all the programs after that. And that was a huge balm to my soul, right? It's beyond the money. The money is symbolic. Money is just symbolic. It was the desire for her to recompense me in full. I didn't need to say to her, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't have done this. I didn't need to come to her with any shoulds and shouldn'ts because I respect her and her own intelligence enough to allow her the space to process it in her own way and to come to her own conclusions about how we move forwards. That's empowering the other person, not treating them like a muppet that you need to tell them, if you want to make this right, you need to do this. Sometimes it can be really helpful in conscious communication to say, if you feel able to offer X, Y, Z, that would feel really good to me. That would feel really nourishing to me. You can do that as well. Sometimes it can be even more powerful to just trust that this person has the intelligence to feel into it for themselves. She could feel the misalignment of our arrangement. Maybe she could feel it even more than I could. I wasn't even aware that it was misaligned until the request came to give advice for these other coaches that are much more expensive, you see? Before that, I wasn't even aware that it was out of alignment. It felt fine. But that changed it. That changed it because relationships change. Goalposts change, and that's okay. But we need to talk about it. We need to communicate about it. The outcome of my courage to voice my truth and her grace to receive it without stepping out of the arena of our friendship because it was too uncomfortable, and her desire to shift the way she and I interact around money, that has elevated our friendship to a whole different level of trust and respect. If I hadn't voiced that to her, that would have stayed dormant in me as a latent trigger. And the next time I offered a program, and the next time she gave me a contribution that really maybe didn't fully feel like as generous as it could have been, that trigger would have stayed there. I could have then become a bit snippy with her, a bit less connected to her. I could have withdrawn, all these techniques that we use to punish people. Not at a conscious level most of the time, but at a subconscious level. None of that was necessary. None of those techniques were necessary when I just spoke my truth. And she had the grace to receive it as a evolving, mature, emotionally mature human who desires to have relationships based on trust. She actually said to me, I'm so glad that this has happened because this is the type of friendship that I desire to have, where we can share when things come up. And not only do we survive it, but we thrive off it. It makes us stronger. It makes us more visible to each other. It makes us feel more safe with each other. Because if we can navigate one activation, we can navigate another. So we don't need to live in fear. We don't need to live in fear that another activation might occur and we won't survive it. We've taken that fear off the table, which makes it safe for her to trust me, and it makes it safe for me to trust her, and it makes us safe to invest in the friendship. For me, for you, for us. As Melanie always says, it's that trilogy of, I want this relationship to work for me, I want it to work for you, and I want it to work for us. Instead of, I want you to do X, Y, and Z for me, otherwise I'm out of here. You see the difference? It's a powerful shift. So I'm going to do a final recap on the acronym. L, love. L, let it breathe. Reaffirm to the person that you love them. Longevity, remind them that you are invested in this relationship for the long haul. Choose your language in a way that is non-confrontational and takes ownership of whatever has emerged or been triggered or activated in you. I really recommend using the word activated over triggered. O is for ownership, taking ownership of what's happened based on what was already there inside of you, not based on anything they've created in you. Opportunity, seeing it as an opportunity for growth. And being clear on your objective. What is your objective for sharing? Is your objective for sharing so that you become more visible, more intimate, more connected, more truthful with one another, to evolve together? Or is your objective to be right and to make them wrong? Always check in with yourself what your objective is before you go into a share. V is for visibility, allowing them to see the truth of who you are, to create more intimacy. And vulnerability, again, allowing your heart to guide you through these conscious conversations, not your ego. And E is for evolution. Is there an opportunity in here for you to grow, for me to grow, for the friendship to grow, for the marriage or relationship to grow to the next level, because we had the courage to have this conversation today. Aho. I am complete. Lindsay and Sarah and maybe one other person, I'm not sure if you are still there. But if you are, drop me a comment. Let me know how that landed for you. Lindsay's saying, what would you say is the best way to respond to being given the silent treatment? See, these are all the techniques that don't belong in the next level of evolution, right? The silent treatment is like a very outdated programming, which is, if you don't behave as I want, if you don't do what I want, I will punish you with my silence. That wound goes all the way back to childhood, when we did something wrong, or we were naughty, or our parents were not happy, and they just stopped talking to us, or they sent us up to our bedroom, or they punished us by in some way silencing us, right? That is a very old wound that if we don't heal it internally, we will continue to be a vibrational match for it externally. Lindsay, I would say the single biggest shift for you, based on my intuition of what you've shared, is to keep switching the lens away from the other person and back towards yourself. How am I complicit in these dynamics? Did you catch most of it, Catherine? Did you catch quite a lot of it? It's how am I a vibrational match for the silent treatment? In what ways do I cut myself off from myself? In what ways do I still punish other people by giving them the silent treatment? Because the chances are, if that's something that you're attracting, that is probably something that also you are doing, or you have done. We've all done it. I was weaned on that when I was a child. That was what my mum did every time I did something that she didn't like. Sometimes I would just say the tiniest thing, and the next thing, the silent treatment dropped on me like a fucking iron curtain and stayed there for days, weeks, or even months. The silent treatment. Horrible. For a child, it's traumatic. It's really, really traumatic. And it's a trauma response. Whoever is doing that to you, Lindsay, 100% it was done to them. And this is what happens when we behave in an unconscious way, is that we perpetuate trauma response patterns in new relationships over and over again, not even realizing what we're doing. So pattern interrupt. That is my biggest advice, is pattern interrupt. Notice what happens when you, hi Alice, heard your summary, wonderful stuff, Laura, gonna watch this from the beginning. Yeah, it's worth watching this one from the beginning, Alice. This one's powerful, and it's helpful for life, you know. So yeah, sorry Lindsay, what I was saying was, what I try and do myself is when I notice myself going into those old patterns of withdrawing from somebody when I feel like they might have withdrawn from me, or being a bit more monosyllabic in my text messages to let them know very indirectly that something's not right, hoping they'll ask me what's wrong. These are all very manipulative techniques. And it's not about blaming ourselves for using them, because they were used on us in childhood, and that has created a code. That has created a code that, you know, exists in your subconscious mind that says, right, if I give someone the silent treatment, they will feel bad. And then I will feel better that they feel bad. Or if I give somebody the silent treatment, they will come knocking at my door and ask what they've done wrong. And they will be desperate to know what they've done wrong, because they will be desperate to reconcile with me. And then I will feel empowered again. Then I will feel like I am the one in the powerful position, not them. We regain our power in these victim, rescuer, persecutor triangles by punishing the other person. And attacking them or giving the silent treatment is two sides of the same coin. So I don't focus my attention predominantly on what other people are doing. And if I find myself falling into that, I pull myself back. I pull myself back and I'm like, wait a minute. The other person isn't... Focusing on the other person is never, ever going to result in the change that you want to create. That is only ever going to come from you. Who have I given the silent treatment to? When do I back away? When do I use silence as punishment? When did I first learn to do that? Is this pattern serving me moving forwards? If not, what do I desire to do to change it? You have to be vigilant with yourself to change these patterns because they go so fucking deep and they are so automated. If I notice myself giving someone a short answer to a text message, hoping that they'll sense something's wrong and ask me what's wrong, as soon as I notice that I've slipped into even a slightly manipulative way of communicating, I correct it. I'll send them another message that's warmer or longer or asking them some questions about themselves. Pattern interrupt. Keep pattern interrupting yourself until it's not a pattern anymore. And in the process of that, compassion, compassion, compassion for yourself, that you were shown this way of interacting and you are perpetuating it unconsciously. It's not your fault. It's not your fault that those are your patterns, but it is your opportunity to shift them for you, for the people in your life, for the people that you will begin to attract in your life once you shift those patterns, and for the world. These are changes that need to happen on a huge scale. And they happen droplet of water by droplet of water. See yourself as a droplet in that ocean. You contribute to the frequency on the planet. You contribute to the healing. You contribute to the new ways of operating in the 5D. You get to shift it when you shift it in yourself. Lindsay, let's just check this one. I'm getting sick of feeling punished to the point where I'm coming close to cutting them off, but I know that will cause me pain too. Yeah, I think I totally feel where you are, Lindsay. It's very, very hard to be in these patterns with people. I would say mirror work would be really helpful for you. If you can find the courage to sit in front of a mirror and give yourself the affirmations that you desire to hear from others. You sit in front of the mirror and say to yourself, I love you. I'm with you. I am by your side. I will never abandon you. I will walk with you forever. I am your best friend. I believe in you. When you begin to do that mirror work with yourself, affirming to yourself everything you desire, you will see the external reality shifting accordingly. But as long as you keep focusing on the drama triangles that, that we all get sucked into, that is a highway to nowhere. No shifts can come from there. The shifts come from mirror work, journaling, inner work, and pattern interrupting. That's where they come from. And patience. Patience with yourself takes time. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, Lindsay, for bringing your truth, bringing your life, bringing your examples. It brings a lot of growth and fruitfulness to the conversation. So thank you so much for that. Alice, thank you for being here. Thank you for your enthusiasm yesterday and today. Janet, thank you for being here. Jess, I think you'll probably pop back later. Nina, I think you were going to watch it later. And whoever else has caught some of this today. Share the Goddess Ascension group with any friends that you think would like to be here. Invite them, include them in the conversation. Together we rise. Have a beautiful day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.